Yeah, this has been kind of a long time coming. You're a pretty entertaining dude. One of the most entertaining people I have met since I moved here.
I
Um,
appreciate it.
for everyone, this is Max. Um, Max and I became friends when we were uh, training for a triathlon, and he's an unbelievable swimmer. I mean, an absolute shark in the water.
Oh
Just
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so that's how that went down. No, Max is one of my favorite people. He he works at a place down the street. Max, you want to talk about yourself a little bit? And this is not booze, by the way. This is tea. I'm trying to, whatever.
I mean, I wouldn't judge it either way. I feel like Also, I'll first say I work at a whiskey bar, and that's kind of where that Luke and I first met. And a few of the other bartenders introduced him to me, and it just turned into this thing where it was like we would just shoot the shit, every time, and it just became really friendly. And then you know, hung out, started drinking with him too, became drinking buddies.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, Luke's also a really entertaining guy. I feel like he always has something fun to say. And yeah,
I gotta ask you, because I've got lots of friends who work in the service industry. I tend to blend with that group pretty well until I've had maybe a few too many. Um, but what do you the thing about hanging out with a service industry person? I think that's really important, especially a bartender, but really anyone who works in that industry, is that due to the nature of the work, you've got to be like on
yeah,
for hours at a time. It's an exhausting experience. Not something that I've ever really done other than like on work trips, um, where I mean, I'm in a strange city for 4 days, and from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., you're on, except for
yeah.
like when you're eating, and it's exhausting to me. I like being on stage. I like doing that thing, but I don't know how you people do it. So my question is like, what do you do to decompress that you can say legally?
I feel like it's typically I'll go into a shift or whatever, and that to me almost it supplements a lot of my normal day to day social interaction with people. Like that, the biggest chunk I get where I'm talking to strangers or friends or anybody, coworkers, um, is at work. And so I think it's the type of thing where if I'm not actively coming from work or going to it, it's a whole lot of kind of monotone activities. So like I'm not super entertaining. On my days off, I don't usually go to bars in general. Unless it's something planned with friends.
Right.
Like usually the hobbies I have involve like, I mean, to use your term, if being at work is being on, my version of being off is like sitting at home and like soldering something together.
Yeah.
It's not something that is me going out and being super social. If anything, it's usually the opposite that kind of helps uh, circumvent that feeling of being on, the entire time.
What would be something that you would be on for in a non-work setting? Like,
I feel like, oddly enough, in in college, I feel like it was typically lectures. So hearing somebody talk about something that they're very passionate about or have a lot of like credibility or experience in. I've always found that really entertaining. I think just because I like to pick up little tokens of information, of things that I find interesting or I see other people are passionate about.
right.
And so I think that's typically when I will be the most on, where it's not the same as work, because I feel like for work, it's meant to be, you got to be on because you're constantly talking to people and interacting and trying to have this natural interaction that with a stranger,
Yeah.
versus something where it's focused and pointed in me and this other person that I want to hear all of the fantastic things that they have to share. And so I think that's when I'm the most engaged. is when I'm listening to somebody else.
Do you do you find it uh okay, I'm gonna ask because this is changing the subject completely, and I apologize. But I love that you like passionate people or people who are passionate in something. One of the coolest things about starting this channel was like learning how to make thumbnails, which I learned on Sunday. Like,
Yeah.
cutting and doing and whatever and all that stuff and editing video. Oh, that's really cool. And I've really like that part of it is the like learning the new different things is my favorite part. But when you're talking about passionate people, what have you ever walked by someone while working and thought like what they were talking about and how they were talking about stopped you like from doing your job where you're just like, oh, can you think of like, is there something out there where you're just like, oh, they're talking about Marvel or D&D or
Yeah,
visual
whatever the
symmetry
things
or
that are like flagging me down, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
something that catches my ear. I feel like it'll follow what I was interested in when I was in college, which is typically science related. So one of the first bars I ever worked at, um, there was this physicist from NASA that he lived in the neighborhood, and he would have these like ridiculously cool stories, and some of them like would be mundane office interactions, but then
yeah.
sometimes he would pull a ridiculously crazy story or test that they just ran. And then the same thing for Barrel. I mean, like there's some people that will come in and they have really interesting jobs just because we are in a really interesting city. Um, but typically science related stuff, entomology related stuff because I'm big on bugs. I like bugs.
Okay,
And then I think the other one is anything like anything that is a strong opinion about music too. I feel like will catch my attention. Like
okay,
I remember playing the song "Lovely Day" by Bill Withers, and in the middle of it, I'm walking by this couple, and this guy says to his boyfriend, "I hate this song." I was like, that is such an intense emotion
right.
about something that is usually a very like peaceful, tranquil type of song. And so I pulled over and I was like, I have to talk to you about this.
I hate this that's so funny. Yeah, hot takes get me. Um, and I try not to dive in. Something that stops me too is when and we do this, you and I do this enough that it's pretty funny. Is when someone is in their bag, right? They're playing their own caricature, whatever
Yeah.
that is for them. Um, it whatever it spikes my dopamine. Like, it's like, "Oh, we're doing this. I'm in. Let's do it."
Yeah.
Like, I love and your character, I mean, part of being on is a character,
Yeah.
but I like your non-work character too, because it's so interesting, and the bits, and you can follow along in the bits, and they're really like, what was one that you've been in recently? Like, something you just had going, and you kinda just got lost in it.
Like, are you saying like just a little gag that I'll have with whoever's across the bar?
I mean, a running bit for me is that I know Barack Obama. That's one that's like my, thing.
The
It's
go-to.
yeah, 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 for sure. I'm like, oh yeah, me and Barry. Well, when he's in town, we play basketball about on Tuesdays at the court down the street. And Michelle's never had me over, but I think
I
it's
think.
because I embarrassed her once when we were doing pull-ups,
I
doing a
mean, yeah.
pull-up challenge. It's one of my favorite bits. I think it's hilarious that he's Barack Obama is so cool and cool enough that he would play basketball with me down the street. Probably all time, probably the coolest president, like in terms of smooth, being smooth. I mean, Bill's got his own echelon, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
I do think it. I feel like I totally agree with you, but I also think it's worth noting that the competition for cool, for presidencies, I feel like there's a handful that I'd be like, oh, dude, Teddy Roosevelt was cool, like he did some cool stuff.
He did some really cool stuff.
But it's like when you compare him to someone like Barack Obama, I'd be like, yeah, in a personable interaction, I would definitely say that Barack Obama is definitely more of a chill guy.
Yeah,
I feel like in
yeah,
terms of gags though, or like little bits that I carry on is the one that I find probably the most endearing is there is a woman that comes to the bar and from the beginning she would call me Sam, even after I introduced myself a few times, because this is also a regular that
I love that.
um, they're a part of like this group of regulars that know each other, have been going there from even before I was in the neighborhood,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so. But every time she'll call me Sam, and sometimes it's accidental, but sometimes I do know that it's intentional, um, just because I think it's this cute thing of like, "Hey, Sam," yeah. And since she's also a part of the regulars, all of the people look at her with the most bizarre looks, of like,
right.
"Why are you calling him Sam?
Like,
That is not his
what do you
name."
mean? Why aren't you calling him Sam? Like,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
why don't you call him Sam? Sam?
Okay, that's cute. I like
Yeah,
that one. I like
really
that one.
endearing.
It's really that's a really cute one because it's like it's not harsh. There are harsher ways,
Yeah.
to I like that one. Um, do you have you always kind of been like this?
Have I always kind of been
Where
like, I
like, oh, I find, being yeah, you just jump into the bit. A lot of people don't even get it. Right, they don't understand what's happening.
yeah, I think I don't know what it is because it was I was never in like theater. I was always interested and loved going to like improv shows. I like that idea of of comedy. I think it aligns with what I think is funny. Where it's like no preparation, just trying to kind of out joke each other. But we're both laughing because the things we're saying are funny. And so I'm like, to me, it's just one of the stronger ways to connect with people, I think, in my mind, is to have little bits like that in the normal interactions that I think
Well, well,
makes people more familiar.
you do an excellent job. Like I have a tendency to be more cruel when every once in a while I'll say something. I'm like, okay, that was a little insensitive. Uh, with you, it never happens. It's really awesome. Like, cause I'm like, is he gonna go? No, he didn't go there. Okay, it's okay.
Yeah, I feel like I think there are things that I'm not saying this is your type of humor, but like there are things that will strike and like hit me with like sadistic humor, where it's like, okay, that was I can see the humor in that, but it doesn't get the same laugh out of me as even like immature jokes. Like I feel like I don't get the same sort of joy or humor from something that is kind of the punchline is how like gory it is, in terms of the things that you're saying. Um and instead I would rather I would laugh harder at something that's like an immature like poop joke. It's like I feel like
Poop jokes are great.
obviously those are two really drastic different senses of humor, but I'm just saying that like in terms of what I think uh is funny, I veer away from that type of comedy. I can still see the humor in it. It's just it doesn't get the same laugh out of me.
Have you ever thought about doing um, stand up?
No, I think well, so from even when I was younger, I would have family friends or friends of older brothers or whatever that would say like, "Oh, he's a funny kid. He'll say funny stuff." Um, but it was also the thing of like, anytime it's a spotlight put onto that of like, "Hey, you're funny," say something funny. It's not going to happen. I think that's a really unnatural way for like jokes to be passed around in general. But I feel like
Agreed.
turning it into a stage where it's intentional and you're prepared like that, even then, I think I
Yeah.
enjoy the back and forth. I don't enjoy standing up and just being on my own. You know, I like having the support of someone else that can kind of veer the joke somewhere else that I can, you know, he can zig, I'll zag. You know, it's that type of thing where playing off with someone, I think,
Right.
makes it so I feel funnier too.
I think I think a warm up for someone who also gets it sometimes. Not as and I'm not as funny as you are, I think, in general, but um what a weird thing to say out loud. But I just don't think I am. And so one of the funniest I kind of have to be like a warm up. If someone was like,
Mm.
"Hey," like a singer or anything, it's like I'm not good. I'm not gonna sing. I'm gonna sound horrible. Tell a joke. What?
Yeah,
Nah, I'm okay.
yeah, I
I
think
don't have like a holster full of just ammo that's jokes. Who does?
right.
Who does?
Yeah, no, and I think that's something that's not profound to say is like that's an uncomfortable way to tell a joke is to have someone put you on the spotlight for it. But I think to me that's what it would feel like if I was on stage where it's just like if I run out of material that I thought would hit and it's not, like that type of pressure is too much, I think, for me to see the benefit,
I, I think it's one of the all time greatest compliments to give someone is be like, oh, you're clever, like you're funny. Um,
I yeah,
yeah.
I agree.
Um, I once met a girl who was funny. Okay, that wasn't funny. That was not funny. See, I'm bad at telling jokes. I'm not very good at telling jokes. But I did meet a girl who was like really, really funny. Like she understood the bit. She was in it all the time. And it's like one of the most attractive qualities, men or women. I'm just like, okay, you get it. You get this isn't none of this is real and everything's made up. Okay, great, great, great. You get it.
I do think that's something that incites like a lot of connection is having someone that gets your sense of humor and like the things that you love about your sense of humor they align with, and like
Mhm.
that's one of the quickest ways I think for uh people to connect or be friends.
That's the that's what I love about, and I'm modeling a lot of like this channel actually, uh, as a blend of like an interview show or whatever, like the long form content. But also, I watch and listen to the Pat McAfee show like every day.
Mm.
I'm a couple of weeks behind because of why am I a couple? I'm a couple of weeks behind. I don't know why I'm the couple, but I'm watching every. It's a 3 hour show. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but
Oh,
it's a sport. It's a show about sports. The guy is a former punter, and it's just him and his buddies talking about sports every day. And they're me and you. I mean, they are genuinely regular people. There's nothing um, other than the fact that they work hard. I don't know that there's anything of note about any of them. There's no real nepotism. None of them are super super rich. They're just regular dudes. And the energy they take toward professional and college athletics is something that resonates with me, like you're talking about that resonating humor, and that like they and you've been at the bar where you have people that will clap for first downs,
yeah,
and I'm like, buddy, that is their job. Stop that. Like, unless they've never had one before, stop it. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to
respectful.
judge people. It's just not it's not the way that I view things. And when you watch them, the way they talk about sports is like they see it as a gimmick in that these people are professionals and they're the best in the world at their job. They are the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. You can go on and
Right.
on and on. Incredibly athletic. Um, but they're also adults getting paid millions of dollars to play a kid's game in costume. Let's not kid ourselves. That's what's happening here. so, so from that perspective, uh, I immediately was in. I was like, "Oh, this is hilarious. I'm into this. We resonate. Like I am part of this community forever now. Like, and they feel like my friends. I wouldn't know them. They wouldn't know me from anybody. But the way their energy is like, oh, okay, cool, cool, cool. We get it. We get it. And so it's incredibly entertaining. It's something you should like if you ever get a chance. The sports stuff that they talk about may not be interesting, but whenever they're doing their bits and stuff, it's like watching professional wrestling. It's hilarious. Have you ever watched professional wrestling?
I have.
It's
I've seen some pretty solid clips. There's also one that I saw. It was a WWE bit with John Cena doing a heel turn.
mhm. Like
I
recently, like last
Yeah,
week? Yeah.
right. That's I think the more recent one that I've seen. But before that, it was all just like intro clips. You know, that wasn't a big thing for me growing up, at least.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of neither was sports, which has always kind of played a funny role at a bar too, because bars are the best place to watch the football game, any game. And so it's always this funny dynamic of anytime a guy's like trying to shoot the shit about sports, how I do like a little thing in my head of how long do I think they'll want to talk to me about sports
That's
before
funny.
I have to confess that I don't know shit. I don't know any of these
Yeah, yeah.
people. I know the rules of the game, you know.
It's like, "Oh, no, I know they're people,
Yeah,
and they're playing with a ball."
right. And in this one, you can't touch it with this specific limb.
Right.
Yeah,
Or in this one, it's a ball thrown at someone else, and that somebody else has to hit that ball with a stick.
yeah.
It's so silly.
I
Um,
think with
yeah,
the Pat McAfee show that you were talking about, I think one of the things I like, and I was talking to, I don't know if you ever met Josh, who was a server at Barrel,
yeah,
but I was talking to him about this about music, how finding little inconsistencies uh, in recordings or like instruments that will scratch or squeak, just with updated audio quality, you can hear that in older songs.
right.
And so we were talking about how it's kind of endearing to have something be so genuine and like something that you're you can identify with. And so I'm like, that's kind of what that sounds like to me, the Pat McAfee stuff, where it's like having someone that is having this like genuine interaction. I think is also something that tends to attract people, is even
Yeah,
the incongruities and stuff like that.
very in the moment.
Yeah,
Very in the moment. For me, I constantly capture, clock myself not being in the moment. Like just a second ago, I'm not gonna lie to you. I just posted a Daredevil Born Again trailer reaction like seconds ago, like right before we got on this call or this interview, and I'm like, how many views does it have? And we were talking about genuine connection, and in the moment, I'm like, yeah, but it's got 14 views already,
yeah,
So
yeah. But hold on, I'm
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, don't do that. And I'm like, God Almighty, Luke, you are a troll. Um, eh, and I am a troll. That's a fact, actually. I love trolling. Massive troll, massive troll. Uh, but yeah, in the moment, um, I have pretty bad ADHD. So when it comes to interactions, I've got to like, on top of being medicated, I've got to catch myself before I run away with the conversation
yeah. I
constantly.
I definitely can align with that. Just
Yeah.
because in my head, I will talk and talk and talk, and sometimes I'll take breaks into what I'm saying that are long enough where I will get distracted in my own head and
Yeah.
forget what I'm talking about.
Wow, me
I'm
too.
like, okay, that's maybe the sign that I should tone this down. Let somebody else talk.
It's ruined dates, like a
Yeah,
lot of them. It's kind of hilarious, actually. Like thinking back, I mean, at the time it was horrible, but but
right,
my new trick for me is to if I feel myself wanting to talk for the sake of talking or whatever, or change the subject or tangent hard, because
right,
what ends up happening, right, is like it's like tangent, 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 and I get to the fifth tangent and I'm already thinking about if it's like, how did they connect? How did you get there? I once had a girl ask me, how did you get there? How'd you, we're, we were not remote. Like, what, can you link it for me? And I
right.
did. And she was like, wow, that's insane. And I was like, yeah, imagine
I
being here. Imagine being me.
I feel like I would fail at that every time if someone was like, "Hey, what did we talk about to get here?"
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you. Sorry,
Not,
that's old news. That
yeah.
that was in my brain for half a second and then is now gone.
Yeah. So that trick is for me is, It's so silly. It's so basic. It's like relax, relax, relax.
Yeah.
Ask a question on from the topic when they're finished speaking. And so it's helped a lot. It's helped a lot. I noticed when I went to an audition recently for a stage play here in DC, and I spent a lot of time on the sides beforehand. They gave me the sides like a week before, right, which is like 2 or 3 pages of script. So I was pretty damn near close to having it memorized. And uh, I in the audition process, which is its own thing, I remember thinking, wow, I am sprinting through this. Why am I so nervous? And I didn't end up getting the parts per se, but one thing I noticed from that interaction and a few others pretty recently was this whole like using this like relax, relax. Like they want you to be here.
Yeah.
You don't have to prove anything. So, which is also a trauma thing, I think. But yeah, that really has helped me a lot. Like relax, relax. It's okay.
Yeah, I think because being seen as like calm, it also is associated with that confidence, and I think that's what a lot of people tend to not only find attractive, but I think appealing for somebody in any sort of interview. Uh, if you're auditioning for stuff, I feel like any sort of interaction like that, seeing that sort of confidence, I think is always something that bodes well.
Hmm.
And it's really hard to maintain, is like it is a constant, I think, mantra to try and get myself through stuff where I have to appear really confident to somebody, or I want to appear really confident to somebody.
Right.
Um, it takes a lot of mental mental effort to not, you know, get overly excited or jump the gun on something.
Takes a lot of reps too.
Yeah.
It's not something you can just start doing. I had a colleague who I respected quite a bit. He's probably the smartest person I've ever met. Like so much smarter than everybody else. It was it was awkward talking to him.
Yeah.
Uh, and the best part about him was he's confident, um, and he's charismatic, and he was a good person. So on top of being this brilliant person,
Yeah.
incredibly thoughtful, I he came up to me one day, and we were at a conference, and he said, "You're always." My second favorite compliment I've ever received outside of "you're funny" is he said you're just always so relaxed. Everybody else seems to be running around. You got it all the time. And I was like, holy crap! This really brilliant, smart, charismatic, thoughtful dude just said I was relaxed. That's really, and I was
Yeah.
like, and so I didn't know what to say. So I said, duck in a pond, buddy. You know how it is. And just kept walking. And I was like, ooh, that was weird.
Yeah.
Duck on a pond. And then he said it back to me like weeks later. He was
Oh,
like, yeah, he said it. I was like, oh God, good. It landed. Thank God. Thank
I
God.
yeah. No, that's how I saw it. Because in my like you playing it out to me from his perspective, that probably felt like a bit like a movie interaction, where it's like duck in a pond, man, and he just sees you stroll away, and he's like, "Hell yeah, man!"
Yeah, yeah,
you know?
duck on a pond. It's where is that from? That's from a movie. Is it from like Mighty Ducks?
Duck in a pond. No, that honestly, that's probably the first time I heard that one.
So but on the surface it's calm and underneath the feet are
Yeah.
taking a mile a minute. It's from a
Right.
movie. It's from a movie that I heard when I was a kid. But yeah, it was the quickest. It was the fastest thing I think of. Yeah, duck on a pond, buddy. And
Yeah.
we just kept walking. And he, but on the inside, just nervous and sweating and thinking about being introducing a new speaker the next day, or
Yeah.
what executives I needed to meet in order to make face for the organization I was working for or whatever. And yeah, duck on a pond, buddy.
Duck
Just
on a pond.
just um I do a lot of conditioning, like
Yeah.
physical conditioning, and all like I said, making that thumbnail yesterday took me like 2.5 hours. because I just didn't know how to use the program, and it's free to use, and blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah blah, and it's also free to use, so it's cheap. Like it's
Right.
not super user friendly. And I made one today in like 25 minutes, and I imagine it's just going to get faster and faster and faster. And I love that part of learning something new. You know, it's like when you drive to high school and you're a senior and you've been driving the same route every single time. So you kind of just doze off while you're driving. You don't even remember driving half the time. You remember getting in your car and you remember being there. But for that, whatever length of time, for me is like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I was like, oh my God, I don't remember at all driving. That's wild.
And I feel like for driving, it can be a little nerve wracking because it's like, was that light red? You know, just like double checking yourself even
Yeah.
when you are on autopilot. Um, but I agree. I feel like honing a skill to the point where you can do it passively, it is something that feels really satisfying to recognize after the fact, you know, because then it's like, shit, I do know how to do this and I can do it pretty well, you
Right.
know. So I think that also instills like that confidence that we were talking about. But I,
Oh, yeah.
one of the
Reps.
things, yeah, just getting reps in. Um, I think it's also that like when do feel confident in doing something to the point where it can turn into a hobby or a job. Um, I think also it having that feedback of doing it well makes it feel more comfortable to invest into it. You know,
Yeah.
invest time and money, and so then it just grows from there. It's really cool. I think feeling the progression is always really nice.
Absolutely. One of my favorite, one of the favorite lessons that I learned um, in real life was from blackjack. Um, and then it, I was listening to a couple of day traders a couple of months ago talk about how they do their job.
Yeah.
And essentially, the lesson is not every setup is an A plus setup, right? I don't know if you've played blackjack much, but have you?
Barely. I was more Texas Hold'em.
So yeah, yeah. Essentially, the tactic for blackjack is that you're playing against a casino, right? So it's not the other people at the table that you're
Right.
playing against. You're all playing the same game against the same organization, and you're not playing against the dealer, right? But there are different hands can give you more opportunity, right? And better opportunity and tactics and strategies in order to take advantage of those opportunities. And so I find myself sometimes trying to turn a, you know, trying to turn a D setup into a it's something that's gonna like, be awesome. Uh and then recently I was like, oh yeah, that's not an A plus setup. I'm not doing it. And it completely changed how I do things. That whole mindset for everything. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
It's not A plus setup. Like I'm not gonna the outcome of this isn't remotely near the what could happen, what I'm risking to do it. And I'm kind of old now, so so a lot of that had to do with like, oh, do I go out tonight? No. Why would I want to go out tonight? I don't need to. I don't want to. I'm gonna save money if I stay at home. And is it worth my time? Mm, nope.
Yeah, I think I I definitely struggle with that because I have a tendency to be incredibly stubborn. I feel like I will hold fast to any if I set myself out on that and even partway through I realize that the thing that I'm trying to do is not just not an A plus setup, but just a dog shit setup. Like and a not good. Like
Yeah.
I will still force my way to try and make it work at least a little bit.
Yep.
And only when it's just on fire do I put it out and I'm like, all right, this is done. This is
Well, what's even worse too is if it doesn't happen the way you want,
yeah.
right, or the way you're hoping, you do end up with some buyer's remorse, or the mental. wrestling of, well, I'm learning, or oh, well, at least it's an experience, or nah, it's not really. Stop it. Stop it. It's okay. You don't need to.
Right.
Uh, I also struggle. One the other lesson I learned growing up was there are incalculable amount of variables that created the situation that you're in. So just changing one thing or two things, it's probably not those two things. It's any of these. We should have did this. And hindsight's 2020. And I'm like, well, what if a bear walks in? You know what I mean? Your entire, or what if the power were to go out right now? Right. So
Yeah, I think
yeah, yeah. You
no,
can't keep
I
going down.
I totally get that sort of thing because I think it falls in suit with like going with the flow of how things are and not necessarily trying to change the direction, you know. Um I think taking on that mentality of going with the flow is really peaceful. It takes a lot of pressure off of I should have done this or that. It also takes, I think, a lot of unnecessary responsibility for things that you can't be responsible for, you know. And so I think, yeah, I do try to hold on to it, just going with the flow of how uh, life is. But I also think I am equally stubborn, and so there will occasionally be a thing that snags me, and I really try to make it work.
It's that what gets me is how I used to be, and then seeing that in other people, which is that like good and evil, bad and right, right and wrong. This person's right, this person's wrong, polarizing mindset. And I was like, I'm now like, no, there's no such thing as right or wrong decisions. There's just decisions, like,
Yeah,
and consequences, and that's it. That's all. Like, there's no such thing. And so it's so like, uh, it takes a lot of like hate out of my life now. It takes a lot of
yeah,
regret out of my life. And it's uh it's created a word that I now hate more than any other word in the English language, and it should.
should.
Should. This is what you should have done. Okay, I'm not talking to you anymore. Why not? Well, because you weren't there and you aren't me. So I got nothing for you. And
Yeah,
the counter is like, what do you say then? Right? Like it holds a lot of value using the word should in that way, especially if you're a supervisor, right? Like you're communicating something. And so what do you say instead of saying, hey, this is what you should have done? And so when I was a manager and I was a supervisor, I never said that. I stopped saying that. I would say something like, I would say, okay, so whatever who was working for me at the time. Okay, Chris, that's not the person's name, but okay, Chris, you didn't do this right. The standard is this. And so you like provide them a reference or of what the standard operation is for that task. So it's no longer like hubris, right? There's no longer pride involved. There's no longer
mm,
like uh what's another word for it? The It's immature. Not immature. It is immature, but it's yeah, it's just immature. It's like, oh yeah, well, I'm smarter than you because I'm telling you what you should have done. It's like, no, no, no.
yeah,
I'm done with you forever because you weren't there and you're not me. If you want to tell me what the standard is, I'll take it.
yeah. I feel like that's probably one of the most difficult things to do is, especially for where I work, I consider myself friends with most of the people that I work with. And so
Yeah, we
it's
hate
also this
Jeff. By the
thing.
way, we all hate Jeff. I don't know who Jeff is.
Yeah, right. But we, I think we all tend to struggle about where we will like draw lines or be like, hey, this should be done this way or that way. And even in trying to like placate to uh, being friends with people and wanting to not make them feel bad. It's also it just makes a very hard interaction of trying to ask people to do things a certain way without coming off like an asshole. Like it's
Yeah.
I think a difficult thing in any situation, but I think it's even harder with um, people that you aren't in just a strictly professional relationship.
Oh, right, when there's, like, emotions and feelings involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that's really tough. Right. That's really, uh, yeah.
Yeah.
I struggle with that with my brothers, or used to quite a bit. Um, I was once I speaking of when feelings involved, I don't know why I jumped to this, but one of she's now a great friend of mine. But there's a girl that she's a bartender, and then we used to date. And she's beautiful and she's smart and she's a hilarious human being and but not like intentionally. I just find her really funny and she cracks me up. And when we were dating, she's she she did this thing when we would like argue, and we didn't argue very much, but when we would argue, she would say, uh, "Do you understand?" And I would say, "Yeah, of course I understand." Great, and then she would just walk away. And after the second, I was like, "Wait, no, I like." But I had my point. Okay. After the second time, I was a total jerk about this. I still think it's funny. She does not think it's funny. I think it's funny. I would say, "Oh, I completely understand. I just don't agree, and that's okay." Boy,
Yep. Yeah, that
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 was
feels like throwing dynamite into a fire.
buddy.
That
She
type of
was
response.
mad as hell. I mean, it was kind of. I
Yeah.
mean, I knew exactly. I knew, because we talk about you. I think that you're funny and you're thoughtful, Max, and you get the bit, and I think that's really cool. But one of my greatest skills is building people up. Right? Is
Mm.
engaging with people in a way where they feel better about themselves, or look better in front of other people. Pretty good at the whole wingman thing. I got more wins than losses on that, I think, all time. But I'm also like super good at the other side. Um, like how Batman has a contingency plan for the Justice League. Well, like I can take my like I can take a look at a person for a little while, understand their insecurities, and like put a massive micro, whatever, make it, and then just like put it in their face.
I
And
think,
I try not to use it, but man, is it fun to
yeah.
do it. It's fun
No,
as
so I think
fuck.
to me that goes into like reading people, right? Is like since you can interact with somebody even in a minor shallow interaction and then still be able to pick at things where you're like, all right, so you don't like this thing, you don't really, you're trying to hide this with that.
Yeah.
It's all just being super observant of somebody. And typically I'll do that because I want to know what the other person is thinking. I want to know what their expectations are. I enjoy having that as like guidelines for how they want our interaction to go.
Right.
Um, and so that's typically how I'll be very observant. But when definitely when I was younger, but if I didn't like somebody, I could also do that. Where it's like you can find things that they will be insecure about, and you can really fuck some people up by
Bad.
pointing them out. And I think that's it falls into the same thing with like the humor thing we were talking about.
Yep.
That in my head I'm like, there's too much guilt rattling around here in general. And so if it's also on top of that, I gave somebody a new insecurity or highlighted it,
Yeah.
oh man, it's detrimental.
I almost every time I've said something to someone I felt guilty about it.
Oh yeah.
Now there is a few times where I was like, "Nah, stuck the landing. That was right."
Yeah.
I did.
Occasionally there are definitely little spouts of anger where it's like, no, that was good.
That
Yeah,
was right.
that's what that that's what that interaction needed.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But there's a few, not a lot. There's not.
Yeah.
Some people deserve it, and we can just, you know what I mean? Like, no one deserves cruelty, but some people deserve that, and that's okay. Like, we can agree that that's, not everybody, not everybody who gets it, but some people do, and then when it happens, it's hilarious. And uh, what stinks, like I said, is I don't get to do it, right? Because like I'll think it,
Right.
and then the muzzle or whatever you want to call it comes out. And I'm like, all right, don't say that. Don't fucking say that. Don't say that.
Yeah.
Don't say that. But like what's great
It's
is when new bullets come into the gun for people you've known for a long time.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, it is really dangerous for me to be walking around with one of those types of insults in the chamber,
Yeah.
because like I also will regret it heavily if I just get pushed to the point where it goes off, you know, because then I'm like, fuck, I wasn't supposed to ever say something that mean.
Yeah. And what's horrible is it's pretty clever. Like you've
Mm,
come up with this thing that is been created through a level of empathy that
yeah.
it's hard to describe. Like you have to do it, you have empathy. Like you empathize with who they are. So part of that is most of that's good, usually, unless you're a sociopath. Um, but there, like I said, there's sometimes when it's just like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it,
Yep.
don't do it. Speaking of wingmanning, have you do you often wingman when you work? Do you help a brother out?
I feel like I'm really good at the kind of like I will try to gas up somebody that I'm that's a regular at the bar right when they like come in. You know, that's like when you do the big greeting. You know, you say hi to them, and you know, keep in mind some regulars at the bar I do consider to be almost like old friends. You know, at this point for how often I'll see them or
Right.
whatever it is, how long our conversations will be, but. Even if it's somebody that I'm like mildly familiar with to the point where I just know his name, I will kind of make a deal out of it if it looks like he's on a date, you know, or for like a first date or
Yeah, I think you've
um,
done that for me a time or two. I know Anthony has. Anthony has a time or two also.
yeah, I feel like I that's something that is always kind of endearing, I think, is to walk into a place and the person behind the bar is happy to see whoever you're with. I'm like, that to me is all good signs, you know, where
Yep.
it's like they're, you know, fans of the people that work here, they're fans of him. And then it makes all of the other interactions with the person that they're with feel more like kind of welcoming. Just because I think there's sometimes this like nervous energy that people can have at bars where like they don't want to piss off the bartender or the bartender's already pissed off and they don't want to make them more mad, you know. And so having it where already the person behind the bar is super welcoming
Yeah.
to your friend or first date or whatever, um, I think that also puts whoever they brought in a much more comfortable setting too.
Yeah.
um, I do that, and I also will definitely drop the occasional like a compliment as I'm walking by. Just it's very minor because I also don't want to assume a lot of stuff, and then it just
Yeah.
feels weird, you know.
Right.
And so typically I'm all about just gassing them up with small things here and there as I'm walking back and forth.
There you go. That's really cool. It really is cool because hanging out with bartenders is awesome. Outside of like it's like hanging out with rock stars.
I feel like that's just because DC is littered with bars. It's
No, it's like that at home. It's like that at home too. Like,
really.
oh yeah, yeah. I've got friends who are bartenders, and you'll go to, another restaurant or some sort of social setting with them, and people will walk away from their conversation to come talk to, you or the Chris's of the world, or the girl I was talking about. I mean, people find a reason to talk to her
Yeah.
because she's this like unattainable thing who's nice to them, right? uh and most of the time it's because you're getting paid to be, but sometimes you're just nice because you're a nice person, right? So the whole thing is incredible, and we as civilians are very happy that that you people do the
Yeah.
wingman,
You people.
that you working people are do that. It's a you're not getting paid, and it's a great service.
Yeah.
Speaking of the service industry, I have two more service industry questions.
Yeah.
The really Okay, so it is of my opinion. Okay, let me go back. Is it difficult when you were single? When you were single, was it difficult to not to date in like because it's pretty incestuous, the service industry? So
Yeah.
dating colleagues, was that a thing?
Not really for me. I mean, I when I started bartending, it was right in the middle of my senior year in college. And I just fell in love with it, but also all the people I was working with. I started originally as a barback and then um, trained to be a bartender, and then was a bartender there for like a year and a half. And during that time, I mean, everybody that I worked with was closer to 30. And so
Jeez.
the fact that I was still in college and just freshly 21, there was not really any sort of even interest, I think, in me besides like, oh look, he's a kid, like that. I think was more the mentality for the first place I worked. Um, the second bar I worked at, also no, just because the interactions were a lot colder. It
Okay.
was, it was, it was a lot more competitive. It was more stereotypical, like these are our sections, and also I wasn't there long enough to really have any sort of like seniority,
Yeah.
and so nobody was really. I just didn't get really close with anybody at that job,
Okay.
um, and I feel like since I had then been in a relationship, uh, even from before I started bartending, it was you know it's never been something that's been even on the table, just because also the people I've worked with have been really respectful. And I think I definitely will flirt, as a bartender. I feel like that's part of the job sometimes,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
is
yeah.
being a little flirty.
A little charisma never
um,
hurt nobody. A little
but
charisma.
it also is kind of my favorite thing that the group that I think is the most receptive to me, like being a little flirty, is like middle-aged women. It's kind of my favorite thing,
Yeah.
just because it's like I get to do a little dance, and they're like, "Yay!" you know, I don't know what it is. It's very funny to me.
No, that's awesome. They're um the best.
Yeah,
Flirting with middle-aged women is awesome. Needs to happen more in the real world. No, I think that you know, but it's such a cliche that bartenders only date other bartenders because they have the same days or times schedule, and it's such a faux pas in the regular and non-service industry jobs to date a colleague. Like,
yeah,
you're not supposed to do that. And I got a couple of friends who met at the office I was working at, and they started dating, and they're now married with a kid. And nothing was inappropriate, nothing was weird. They would go on walks together, right, at break time, but
right.
nothing was like they they weren't nothing about their relationship was inappropriate, and they definitely handled it the ideal way. There may have been
Mm.
an incident, maybe, but it's not even something I knew about, and I was pretty close with them. I was at their wedding, so it was uh and we used to go out a lot. And so it was really, really cool. But it's almost like a bartenders dating each other is like, oh, right, that's a thing. right? Like it's not even a faux pas. It's not even taboo. It just happens.
Yeah, I think it's also the type of thing where our depending on where you bartend, your schedule can be completely different. Not even in the terms of like what days you work, but more in the sense of I'll get home at 3 a.m. I'll get home at 4 a.m. And then be awake and then go to bed and be asleep for most of the day.
Right.
And so even in the sense of when I'm awake or at work is going to be completely opposite of most other people.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's definitely one of the things that has been harder um, with working at bars later and later is that uh, I my partner, she has a normal 9 to 5 type of job, and then she also works at a cafe on the weekends.
Nice.
And so there's some alignment in terms of like she definitely gets the service industry type of vibe, and I think she's a fan of when we all go out with all my coworkers too. And so but it is a thing where there are weeks where I won't see her for 3 days and we live together, you
Jeez.
know, or at least I won't see her awake. you know, it'll
Right.
be the type of thing where I just see her in passing. And so that definitely is hard when we have spells like that back to back. Um, but I think we make it work. I think that's mainly why I think people find it appealing to date other people that are not just service workers but also other bartenders, because you're going to be awake at the same time. Your schedules are going to align.
Yeah, there's something about a shifty getting food after the shift, finding
Yeah.
those restaurants that are open until 2 o'clock that do serve until 2.
Oh yeah.
That's where my friend and I met, actually. Before we started, because we were friends for 6 or 7 months beforehand, and then we started dating. And then we dated for like a year and a half, and then um, whatever. I won't go down that road, but we we met because my friends and I had found a barrel, our barrel type place when we were in our 20s. And it was cool because it was on this street, it was on this road in Asheville where all the parking is one way and all the parking was on the left.
Mm,
And it was downtown. Right. So no one ever parked there because they didn't know how to parallel park on the left. Like it was awesome. It was and I say no one, I say, there's it's a tourism city, right?
right.
Not very dissimilar from DC, but it's a tourism city. Groups of bachelorette parties and fraternities, and uh, they show up to go to these breweries or whatever. And so, finding parking is terrible.
Right.
But we found this spot, and we found this bar, and I had known the owners for a couple of years before we found it. And I was like, yeah, we'll just park out front. And we parked out front, and then we would start there, uh, do a shot, do a shot and a beer, and then bar hop to uh, to different things and go play pool or throw darts or whatever. And when I met Kelly, what we would do is, and then we'd all rendezvous back there,
Mm,
and then drink as much water as we needed to after about 1:30
yeah.
or whatever, and then sober up and go home or call an Uber or whatever. Well, she would get off her shift at like midnight and go there and eat their food because they were a service industry bar. And I just saw a cute redhead, and I was like, "All right, I'm gonna sit down and talk to this girl." Um, and no joke, we talked about the first thing that we like struck up a conversation was on anime. Um, and it was because then she has tattoos, and the name of her black Jeep, because of course she has a black Jeep. She's a bartender, like she's a bartender with a black Jeep Wrangler. You know, the name of it is Spike after Cowboy Bebop because she loved Cowboy
Nice.
Bebop growing up, and she's an incredible artist. She's one of the best artists I've ever met. Actually, she's incredible. Um, but we, like I said, we that's where we met. Was there? Was right there, and then it was. She did such a good job while we were dating. Um, and I would go to where she was working because she worked at one of the breweries. And I'd go and just sit. She'd, yeah, come sit after work or whatever, come hang out. And I would. And there was like 3, 4 other people there, right? And she did such a good job, like flirting, but not like taking it too far, and then also acknowledging that I was there, but
Yeah.
not using it as a crutch. It was so respectful. It was so thoughtful. I have seen the other end of the spectrum where it's a beautiful bartender or it's a dude who's just awesome and their significant other is there and it's kind of a super they treat that person pretty bad, right?
Mm,
There's some sort of codependency that's happened there, and the guy's always like, "Why are you flirting with all these people?" And she's like, "That's my job." And it's and for my friend, it was never. I think maybe one time I was like, "Hey, what's the deal here?" And she was like, "Oh, yeah, I took it a step too far. My bad." I was like, "Okay, cool."
yeah, I feel like it's always validating to, get I think in my head, the way that I see it is like when I am being flirty with somebody, um, it's it's always with this idea of like, there's zero expectations. I'm just gonna try and be cute and funny, and hopefully you guys find it entertaining. And I feel like to me that is more in suit with like what you were talking about is like having this character, and having that character at the bar. I feel like is being flirty, but on the other side of that, when I am off the clock, it's like there's zero thought, that goes into the people I was flirting with before.
Right.
Um, I think the most I will ever take home is like if somebody leaves their number on their seat. I take that as a great compliment.
It's got to be.
Um, and I'm like, that's so so sweet of you. And usually I'll come home and tell my partner, and just because like I find that stuff to be really really nice, but also I think in my head, if the roles were reversed, I would want her to tell me, and then be like, "Yeah, that was a really nice compliment. It
Yeah.
happened. There's no threat,
Right.
but it was nice."
Yeah. And I think for your partner, it's a compliment to them too,
Yeah.
right? Because you know, you're not some sleazeball or ugly or you know what I mean. Pretty charming, pretty cool dude, very nice, kind, thoughtful, and a professional, and that's awesome. I did at least one time when I was in my early 20s. I tried to give a girl a number on a receipt,
I feel like
and it
that's
was
the
terrible. I
best way
was
to do it. It's just
w-
like leave your number. They're gonna pick up their receipt and read it anyway because the tip's on there.
yeah. I
And
would
it's
say
also really passive. It's just like, hey, if you want it, it's there.
to the tens of listeners, just don't do it. Just don't do it.
Just
No, no. I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm not. This is not like tacit permission to hit on bartenders.
right.
It's purely if you are like curious if they're interested, just leave your number on the receipt and walk out. Like
Walk out.
that's all you got to do.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. What was the other thing? Okay, we're just all over 2 hours now, and I actually want to talk to you about something else. It's not bartender related, but
Yeah,
I do want to say this, and this is a big, big, big thing. The war on drugs isn't real. It's not real
yeah,
because hot take, not really, because I can go to any city in the country and find drugs, and that's because uh, they are rampant in the service industry, and it's pretty easy to go to a city for 3 or 4 days, find a dive bar or a place,
yeah.
an Outback Steakhouse, which is also a thing, and it's easy. It's easy if cops really wanted to crack down on drugs, they could.
Yeah, I feel like it's also. I think for the city, they know that there's always going to be a certain amount that's just rolling around. I do think it's funny when people come into the bar and it's let's say it's a really busy Friday night, and they try to pull over, one of the bartenders or something like that, and ask like, "Hey, do where I could get something?" Like they try to be slick about it, but there's only so slick you can be asking
Right.
somebody if they have access to cocaine, um,
Yeah.
and so I usually just like look around the bar and I'm like, does it look like this is that type of place. All the
Yeah.
lights are on. Like there's there's lights on all these bottles. We got to like, come on.
There's no cheeky torches. There's no
I'm
Christmas
just
lights
like,
in here that are not white.
at the very least, go to one of the many roads in DC where there's just mostly clubs, where
Right.
it's all just dark LED club music. I feel like you got a better shot. Like
I yeah,
I'm not.
it's so funny because like, and what saved me a lot of times with regard to like officials, cops, whatever, is oh, they're not looking for me. Okay. Right, because they're not looking for me. Uh, one time I got pulled over on a prom night. No, I went through a traffic stop through a prom night. And my tag was dead, and they didn't even say anything because they were
Yeah,
looking for high schoolers.
yeah,
Um, I was like, oh, they're not looking for me. I'm not going to worry about this. Um, but if you wanted to find, if they really wanted to crack down on drugs, like it wouldn't be all that hard. The fact that we started this with how impressed I am that people who are in the industry have to be on for that long. Of course, drug use is rampant. Of course, it is an enhancement like that. I mean, I can't. Like once again, I can't personally cannot imagine having to be on for 6 hours,
yeah.
4 days a week.
I think everyone has like their vice that helps them get through doing something like that. Just because there are definitely days where it's like, shit, dude, I've been smiling for 8 hours. I feel like mine is typically, uh, I'll have my own little like time after the fact where I'll give myself a way to relax. But when I'm actually there, it's typically just a shitload of coffee. But I think the reason why it veers into the realm of like drugs at work or people doing them outside, I think it's also this thing of you're around alcohol all the time. You know, you're the one pouring shots, and I think that also aligns with what we were talking about with bartenders dating each other, where for some reason that tends to have like a faux pas, around it. I think is because typically this stuff is all shrouded with drinking, and so you people that it's the assumption of being inebriated when you're not on the clock. There's that relief of having a few drinks with people that you work with,
Mm-hmm.
maybe doing a little bit more relaxed, and
That's right.
so I think it's something that is very common around there because I think there is like, I have no background or justification to be making claims like this, but the way that I see it is alcohol is acting like the grease for people to be able to make decisions quickly. And sometimes they're not good decisions.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of how, the service industry can walk hand in hand with recreational drug use.
Yeah.
Um, and
Absolutely.
faux pas relationships is because it's also this thing of it is still a bar where the intention is to, you know, get inebriated.
That's it. It's interesting too. I've got you know quaint friends and acquaintances back home who are like they were like microdosing mushrooms their entire shift. What is even more interesting is when I ran into like firefighters who were doing the same thing.
Whoa. Yeah, I never
Yeah,
heard
yeah.
of that.
And well, I asked them. Obviously, I asked them. I was really super curious. I was like, obviously the stereotype is that firefighters are on T testosterone,
Mhm.
right? They're lifting weights all the time. They're hanging out with their friends. They're all cooking together. They're all eating together. They're bunking together. Whatever, right? It's a boys' club essentially. Energy. I like actually, to be frank with you, I love hanging out with firefighters. They're awesome. Like
Usually
younger
they're
male
pretty solid
firefighters.
dudes.
Do what?
Usually they're pretty solid dudes, yeah.
Well, they're similar to like horse girls in that, and I promise I've got a point in that like they've seen some shit, right? Like a horse girl is a girl, and you tend to think of them as like wealthy and entitled and whatever. Every single horse girl that I've met equestrian rider or whatever, has had to take care of an animal that's like 500 pounds, right? That was alive before she was, and then has maybe died you know, since she's been alive, right? So they've taken care of this thing that also carries them. It's fast and it's loud, and you have to feed it and clean up its shit. And so there's like an inherent blue collar nature to, I don't know what if it's blue collar, but there's an inherent grittiness to a horse girl that other people that you don't really get a lot of times. And when you're hanging out with a firefighter, it's a bunch of bro energy. And I said to one of them, I was like, "Oh, right, you're microdosing mushrooms." It's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Well, don't you think that's dangerous?" And when we had the same conversation about uppers with bartenders and whatnot, or whatever people need to do, and he said, "Have you ever cleaned up gray matter with a shovel?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I have not." And it took that one comment for me to be like, "Yeah, you do whatever you got to do to save lives, man. Don't worry about it."
Yeah,
I'm in. I'm with you 1,000%. Like, don't hurt anybody, but whatever you got to do, like, I'd
that
rather
is
you and not me.
it is an interesting point where it's like, if my mild use of psychedelics makes it so I can do my job in pretty traumatic scenarios,
Yep.
that's relatively valid. I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna yuck anybody's yum, I guess, if he's doing
No,
it safe.
I mean, how much Adderall flowing into high schools, right? Like, I recognize it's a prescription and it's legal and all that kind of stuff. But if the effect is the same, right, it helps you be more capable of doing the task that you are obligated to do
Yeah.
or obliged to do. Like, you got it. Go ahead. Don't hurt
Mhm.
anybody. I believe in you. Um, but the other thing that they firefighters super super interesting. I was at a firefighter wedding. Uh, a friend of mine, she was getting married to a firefighter, and so all of the groomsmen except for one, they all worked at the same station. Um, it was so broy and it was so awesome. And it's on top of a mountain, right? So there was no cell signal. It was great. It was
Yeah.
really, really great.
I
And
was I was secretly hoping that a firefighter wedding was two firefighters getting married.
oh yeah, that'd been dope. No,
Sorry, keep
turns out
keep going.
turns out the culture in firefighting is hilarious.
Yeah.
It's like watching a TV show, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
you got the inherent danger, but all of them know, or all of them think, or have the idea in their head that their chosen job is gonna be what kills them. Like they just know it's a part of their whole life. There's a chance a building will fall on them, or they'll get into a car wreck on the way to a fire, or lung cancer, right, from smoke inhalation. Like there's
Yeah.
all these, like they are very aware and self-aware of the dangers of their position, and they do it all the time. So their view on life is a lot more relaxed and a lot more, well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And hanging out with them at a wedding, it was so cool. And then it got to be in about 11:30, pretty close to the end of the reception, and it was in this magnificent barn, and we were all staying in these little cottages, these little like rooms no bigger than this room, like you
Mm.
know, uh, and it was really cute. But the firefighters started taking their shirts off and dancing around with their shirts off. It was like a calendar shoot. It was awesome, and they were just
That's
a bunch
awesome.
of bros hanging out, with their shirts off, dancing with their girlfriends and wives. It was awesome,
Yeah.
hilarious. Now, I don't know, you know, I mean, firefighters, like some male bartenders, get the same response from ladies sometimes. And
Yeah. I I haven't
yeah,
had a wedding where I we all got to take our shirts off yet, but I can plan one.
I'll tell you what, if you get an opportunity hanging out with horse girls, and if any of them are listening, I love you. You guys are awesome. Um, I went to a wedding with a bunch of horse girls.
Yeah.
It was awesome. They are so cool. Like,
I do like the analogy that you made of them having a similar energy. I feel like it does it is kind of like the standard man and woman, like most, like kind of gritty association,
yeah,
to it. Yeah.
it's Well, so yeah, I mean, so we live in DC, right?
Yeah.
The vast majority of people that I and friends that I've made here that aren't working in the service industry are essentially like the student body president at their high school.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting. And uh, there's a reason why people don't stay here very long because it's exhausting. But they also don't have any of that. Like it's tough to find people here that are like gritty. They can like challenge and overcome adversity that is something they've never seen before.
Yeah.
It's often the smartest, most well endowed person that's here, and it's tough when, hey, what do you do? What college did you go to? And that's the first thing they ask you. And so, like you said, when you get an opportunity, Max, to hang out with firefighters or a horse girl or any other kind of person that's
Yeah.
maybe not in your group, it's really cool. I love this. Listen, let me tell you the straight up truth. One of my favorite groups of people to hang out with are black nerds. Black nerds are the best. I talked for 2 hours with a group of black nerds about anime. It was so. I mean, we were talking. I grew up on it. My brother lives in Japan. We still talk about anime. We still talk. Hey, you should watch this one, or this one's cool, or whatever. And I've never met a more passionate group of people about anime in my entire life than that group of dudes. It was awesome.
I also feel like that kind of just embodies what nerds are. Like I feel like just in general, I feel like nerds tend to be passionate about the things that I mean people you spend money on it. You spend money on like figurines, on comics, on manga. And so I feel like anytime it's any group that is nerding out on something specific, it becomes the whole vibe, and it's even better when it's something you also nerd out about,
Yeah,
because then you will just be shooting the shit with this person for however it sometimes it depends on how long the series ran. But I it is kind of my favorite thing. I think that's the one kind of group that I need to uh get into, is like the anime group, where it's like I have seen some of the major movies, I've watched some of the major TV shows. I just don't know why I never stick to the shows, I never finish them all the way through.
yeah.
But I have seen some really, really solid things. I mean, mostly story wise, they have some incredible stuff, not just the art.
Look, there's a show that came out this year called uh it's not going to sound right coming out of my mouth right now, but Freerin.
Mm.
Freerin is it's similar to Dungeons and Dragons. A
Mm.
group well, it's like it would be like the aftermath of a quest, right? And Freerin is your main character, and she's an elf mage, and she's been alive for like 1,000 years. But all the people that were in the quest with her were, regular people, or had, didn't have this immortality. And so the story is about her reliving their quest by herself and taking on an apprentice. And um, she's, she has no pride or hubris or anything, and she's extremely thoughtful. Um, and it's just that the takes that she has in the show are representative of someone who's lived for 1,000 years, and it's awesome. Like it's well done, it's well made. The apprentice that she takes on is a cool character. There's a couple of other characters that are pretty cool, but it's really thoughtful, it's really inspiring. And
Mm.
it's not like, it's not, Dragon Ball Z power-ups and screaming and shooting attacks and
I
machismo.
do like some of the ones that veer towards like realism and like having some darker overtones. It's usually there's some really cool like mechanics for the plot that they have for dark twists, or like they do a really good job with gore too. Like gore horror, I feel
Yep.
like is alive and well in anime.
Yep.
I feel like um it's kind of lost its touch in a lot of the mainstream like American movies, but some really, really impressive gore horror in anime.
I also like in anime what you're talking about. It's cartoons, right? So
Yeah.
there's an inherent level of immaturity and childishness associated with anime, and then like you were talking, horror will happen, or they'll be joking about something and goofing off or whatever, and you're like, okay, it's a cartoon, and something kind of horrific happens, and you're like, oh,
Mm.
this is not PG-13, this is rated R. Like this, it would be if this was live action, it would be rated R. Um, the one thing I the one thing I don't like about anime is it's gonna sound so much like I'm get off my lawn situation, but is like newer anime fans who are claiming that that anime is the greatest of all time. And I'll give you an example: Attack on Titan, right? Widely considered by a lot of people that it's, well, that's redundant, but that it's the greatest anime ever made.
Yeah.
But there's a correlation with these people and uh people who think The Dark Knight is the greatest comic book movie of all time. Like,
Okay.
right. So essentially, it's my thought is, and it's not a complete thought, right? It's not, but my thought is that the Attack on Titan, Uber fans and the Dark Knight Uber fans have this relief they feel from an adult or a creator taking something that is seen usually as immature or childish and and treating it seriously,
Yeah.
or with some, or with mature themes or whatever. And so this is the first time for them that this has happened while they were growing. So they also are maturing themselves, right? Becoming, whenever, usually it's dudes. So I'm going to use dudes for example. They mature, you kind of finish maturing at 25, right? You're pretty much there at 25, mentally and physically. And so the part about that's so interesting to me is like, oh right, you all think the same about The Dark Knight as you do about Attack on Titan. Let me be clear: The Dark Knight is not the greatest comic book movie of all time. It just isn't. Um, there are really bad parts about The Dark Knight, like Rachel. The Rachel character is terrible.
You know, but he says it in such a great way. Rachel.
Yeah, I was. He's a friend, actually. Try to be nice. It's like, oh, cut this bitch out of the movie. What are we doing? Like, what are we doing? But there's parts of The Dark Knight where I'm like, yeah, this is bad. Like, this isn't good cinema. For example, the coolest thing about The Dark Knight is, outside of the performance of the Joker and the yeah, outside of the performance of the Joker, the coolest part about The Dark Knight is how it's produced. So it's produced in a way that each one of the beats that take place within the movie is like its own graphic novel. It's like its own
Mm.
comic. Um, and the way that it's cut, right? It's a hard cut and then to something else, and then a hard
Yeah.
cut to something else. Um, and I think that's really cool. Like, that's, if you're gonna do a comic movie, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Uh, but it also like doesn't it also hurts the movie. For example, the Joker, Bruce Wayne creates a fundraiser for Harvey Dent.
Right.
Um, how Bruce Wayne wasn't going to think that that was going to get attacked? Just, that's the worst Batman move of all time. Like, I don't know if he did it on purpose, and I would rather he said he did it on purpose. Like Bruce Wayne as the Batman did that on purpose. That makes more sense to
Yeah.
me than what they did. But they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna throw you, and I'm gonna try to show you up in front of Rachel and blah blah blah. I'm gonna quit being Batman. It's like, no, okay, whatever. During that scene, which is a dope scene, he's like, Rachel, poor choice of words, drops Rachel. He jumps out of the window, catches her, and they land on a car, which is awesome, unbelievable, but awesome. What happens next? Hard cut, different scene. Where did the Joker go? Did he just run off?
Yeah, I guess that's true. They're all the way up in a skyscraper.
Yeah,
And he's just still in the party with all of these people.
yeah.
All
Also,
right.
like, the
I guess I'll
Batman.
see you guys around.
The Batman showed up. Like, what are we doing? And if these people are as rich as they are, there's gonna be like personal anyway. But like each one of those dudes probably has personal security, who are at the party, right? Anyway. Uh, Same thing for Attack on Titan though. Like I could tear Attack on Titan apart too. Like
Yeah.
it's not the great. I think the greatest anime of all time, probably from start to finish, is yeah, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. From beginning to end,
Mm.
there's not a wasted scene. It's extremely thoughtful. Um, and have you ever seen it?
No, that is like third on my list for the ones that people have recommended. I've made it through
Yeah,
uh, a few others, but
it's really good. I will say, episode 5 is a tough watch.
mm,
There's an ongoing joke online, and I won't tell you. I won't spoil it because it's such a well made episode, and the reveal is heartbreaking.
mm.
And people make fun of it to this day. And it's been around since for 10 years. Okay, last thing. I'm so sorry. I do want to ask you this because it's also been now an hour and 25 minutes, which is much longer than I expected. I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Um,
Happy to do it.
well, for our tens of listeners, um, two things actually. So this series is called Simple Pennies. Do you know what simple pennies are?
Simple pennies?
Yeah, simple pennies.
No.
Common sense.
Oh,
Uh, I was less than sober once, and well, I've been less than sober before, but also I was hanging out with my younger brother, and we were talking trash to each other and having a good time. And I was like, "Yeah, brother, it's just simple pennies, dog." He's like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, it's common sense." And I was like, "Oh my god, that's so smart." My brain immediately switched it, and I was like, "I need to keep this forever. This is so funny. I love this." So yeah, simple pennies,
yeah, I
common
do.
sense.
I do like that. I'm keeping that.
Yeah, keep that forever. And so that's what this is. It's just common sense. It's dudes hanging out, talking about dude stuff. Uh, what is the race and class and age of your current D&D character?
Race, age, and class. He's a Goliath.
Okay.
I think he is. I think he's in his 20s. Um, and he's a paladin.
Is this your first paladin?
This is my first D&D character ever.
Ooh,
I've never played before. I had friends that played, but um, with what I had going on in high school, never really had a chance to join them. And then recently, I was talking to another bartender at Barrel, Emma, and then we became friends with two regulars, Meg and Rick, who
they're the best, by the
um,
way.
they're amazing. They're both really fantastic to talk to. And then we just started shooting the shit about maybe doing a D&D game, and um, Rick's been kind of doing all the DMing, and it makes it a lot easier to have somebody that like has this massive amount of knowledge about the game because I can just ask him any questions. And it's made it all
Yeah.
really really fun.
The two of them are incredibly, like, their knowledge of fantasy and storytelling is unparalleled in my experience.
Yeah, yeah, and they're really funny people too.
Oh,
Like,
and extremely kind.
yeah,
Extremely kind. I've got nothing but respect for them. So I'm glad you're liking it. I'm is the rest of the like I heard I think it was the Vox Machina people. I heard one of them say that the point of D&D is to tell a good story. It's not to become overpowered. It's not to finish the story. It's to tell a good story. And so
yeah.
is everybody at your game in the same place on that?
I think for the most part, yes. I think we all really like the idea of Rick kind of using, the map and book as like a model, but for the most part filling in, all the characters and what those characters are like in terms of their personality.
Yeah.
And he's a fan of voices too, so having them all have different voices, he definitely makes it so it's more about telling the story, and I think we all tend to appreciate that. The fighting mechanics are really cool just because they're very specific.
Yeah.
And it also leaves it open ended for how the attack happens. So specific in terms of like how it's supposed to be set up, but then in terms of how that's supposed to play out and what your character does, it can be pretty open ended depending on what you roll. And so I think the one struggle is that occasionally we'll have people that will focus on like just what are the mechanics of the game, when I think everybody is more interested in like having it be um, like a scene out of a movie, you know, where we're all playing a role in this big fight. No one's trying to be
Yeah.
the main character. And so, like, I think anytime you have people that um, you're not super familiar with, getting used to how they play a game, especially one that's so open ended like D&D, um, I think just takes time and a little bit of patience. But I do like that for the most part. We're all on the same page.
The structure is fascinating to me. I've never played. I love fantasy storytelling.
Yeah,
Everything from Lord of the Rings to that Vox Machina animated show, right? I love that. I just anime. I mean, I love it all. The structure though, it's like my barrier to entry. Um, like I didn't. It took me a long time to even realize there isn't a set story like a video game. Like someone in your group is creating a narrative,
yeah.
and uh, your group is producing the content for that narrative, and it's wild to me that that's a thing.
It
Like,
definitely is fun because it feels like a bit like in an escape room type of vibe, where it's like you have this entire set and there's a clear set of steps that you're supposed to take before you can reach the ending. Um, but you can find the steps out of order. And so I think that part I kind of enjoy about it is that while there's like a rough idea of what's supposed to happen, it doesn't have to happen that way, which can be, I think, the most intimidating for whoever's running the games, whoever the DM is. But I think honestly, Rick is so fantastic with that stuff that he pivots so well. So like when we don't do something that he was expecting us to do, making it so the story can kind of change and go towards that way instead.
mhm. But see,
Yeah,
that's obviously it takes a lot of skill. But like when I watch movies or TV shows
yeah,
now, I can sometimes tell that it was a collaborative effort to produce the content in that show, similar to playing D&D,
yeah,
where there was one person who had this idea in mind, and then it was like five or six other people who were kind of working out what the characters would be doing and their emotions. I mean, if you rewatch the final two movies of the Harry Potter series,
mhm,
it they both have a very D&D feel to them, where the three kids are just going around to different places in England looking for this thing. I mean, when I watch it, I'm like, oh, this feels like, there are trinkets, there are items, there are weapons. I mean, it feels like D&D when I watch the final movie for Harry Potter, more than any of the others actually. Their quest that they go on is wildly entertaining, and it's the first time in the series, right, that they're outside of the school for a significant amount of time.
yeah,
Um, and but now, like, I'm old. I enjoy that storytelling quite a bit more. It makes for better and more creative cinema. Yeah. My older brother has always wanted to like do D&D, but more around Japanese culture or anime or that kind of thing. And so we always kind of messed around with it, but it always turned into like how you can become invincible. Not the character, but how you can become overpowered.
yeah,
Um, but it is something we talk about when we do this. I mean, where this idea came from was it began with my brother and I. We would go on Thanksgiving to my grandparents' house, and it's a 5-hour road trip. and we would just talk about who's more powerful, right? Goku or Superman,
Yeah.
or yeah, we would discuss like hard stuff, um, or share music, and it was just really cool. So that's where this kind of comes from. I wish he was doing. Our new thing now is it how often have you ever been on like Facebook Marketplace?
Fairly decent amount.
Yeah, click on the miscellaneous tab.
Miscellaneous.
it's
I'd be nervous.
it's so funny. It because he's in the South, right?
Hmm.
And so it's like, and I know the towns. And so I was like, well, who is selling a lawnmower without a seat in Weaverville? Like, or you know what I mean? It's just,
Yeah.
and we'll do that for like hours. And I like try to convince him to buy some shit. Like, I'm like, I can't buy that. Like, just buy it. Don't worry about it. Just buy it.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you need a
Don't
horse?
even ask him to ship it to you. Just buy
Yeah,
it.
just buy it. Go get it. Go get it. One of them was like, it was a table. It was a masseuse table, but for pregnant women. So like there was a place in the middle
Yeah.
of the table that Bevel did, but it was very clearly a masseuse table, but for the massage of pregnant women. I was like, go get that.
It's so specific.
Go get it. It's always something so silly. It's really, really great. Or like it's like we saw somebody that was selling like 45 pairs of walkie-talkies. And we're like, why did you need 45 pairs of walkie-talkies? At what point in your life did you think that was a good buy? What are
Yeah.
you
If
doing?
I was bored and looking around on that, I probably would also make weird offers. Like,
Yeah.
could I buy three of them? I don't want all 47.
I, I'd want to like sell a bag of pennies, but for like 200 bucks.
That'd be good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, hey,
You're like, there could be some collectibles in here.
I wouldn't even say that. I just let some asshole buy it. And I'd be like,
Nice.
yeah, it's $200 for a bag of pennies. How big's the bag? Buddy, it's a bag of pennies. What do you mean? How big is the bag? A grocery bag, whatever. Come get it, or put it in like a gallon. I mean,
Right.
talk about
If
trolling.
you're asking me about how big the bag is, I feel like you're already interested enough where I don't have to tell you.
Right? How big's the bag? Fuck you. Just buy it, dude. If you're really, yeah, yeah. How big's the bag? It's so funny to me. It's so funny. Anyway, that's about all I got. Uh, Once again, like I said, I think you're funny as hell, and hanging out with bartenders again is my favorite thing to do. One of my favorite things to do, just because of that. Like your personality right now compared to when you're working is so different,
Yeah,
and great. And I saw you yesterday, right?
you
Um,
did.
and you were out doing stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is a different. And then sometimes I'll see you and you're working, and my God, you have this fucking grin,
Yeah,
and
I.
you're just
It is glued. That is the mask of like, yeah, I'm here. I'm here to
it's
do my thing.
you're yeah, yeah, yeah. Your masking is great.
Yeah,
Like it's really, really good. It's really good because I know some bartenders who, anyway, they, you can tell when they're not in a good mood,
yeah,
and it's not great. Not anyone that you work with, I think,
yeah.
for the
I
most
think
part. But
I think it's also a weird thing for people to have that where it's like just smiling. I'm here. I'm ready.
all right, final thing, final
Yeah.
thing. If you're at a bar, if someone's going to a bar, what are the key things you would tell them in order to ace a bar etiquette class?
Bar etiquette.
Like the two things that I know for sure that are bar etiquette is don't never vomit on the bar, pee or poop or whatever, and
Yep.
also don't go to sleep. Never go to sleep sitting in a bar.
Those
Just be,
those are two pretty great ones. Um,
so outside of that,
I feel like a lot of bars are different, and so the expectations can be different. But like, if you're going into a nicer bar, like don't just have one of the things I don't like is having like people just have money or cards as soon as they sit down to like get your attention, or to start the tab.
yeah,
Um, that to me is like I get that it's them being helpful or like used to some dives where it's like you need the card to start the tab, so I'm gonna just have it out. But it's like stuff like that. Don't do this. This is a big
Uh,
no no. Snapping. Um, I feel like a lot of it is just don't be an asshole. Like it's bar etiquette to me. I feel like is just as long as you're generally a polite person. Don't pick up stuff out of like shared containers. So like if they have a thing of straws, like it's on a mat, or if
yeah,
they have a
don't do
bowl of
that.
fruit, it's not up for grabs. It's set up so they can do the drinks.
That's funny.
Um,
I think it's really funny.
yeah, I've had people take fruit. Or there's another big one. I'll have my garnishes, so like olives, lemons, limes, cut up and
Yeah,
like put on display. It's meant to be like, ooh, pretty,
yeah.
Um, and I've seen people so many times just like reach over the bar to stick their grimy hands after they've been eating and all this other shit and grab like a lemon or a lime for their water. And sometimes I'll make a point of like dumping it out in front of them. Like not on the bar top, but like
Oh
just
yeah, yeah.
dumping it in the trash where it's very clear I have to now recut these lemons
Yep.
because had some stranger touching my fruit.
Don't touch a bartender's fruit. Good to know. One
Mm.
of the things, the two are big. As a as a regular, I have etiquette that I live by. That's kind of personal, and one is the first one is never over drink. Sometimes I do. I've caught myself doing that, but like you're a regular, don't do that.
Yeah.
The other one is um yeah, well also like don't flirt with bartenders. But also like they're at, bartenders are at work. Like don't try to get their attention, don't try to burden them. Don't even if you think that you are, you definitely are. Don't do that, right? But don't apologize for them to them for them doing their job. Like, "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you." It's like, "No, no, no. They came to you.
Yeah.
It's okay." Uh, and then the yeah, yeah, bartenders aren't your friends. They're at work.
Yeah, and I mean, be friendly, absolutely.
Yeah,
But I do think that sometimes that's the dissociation of like, in my head, I know I'm at work, and I know what I'm supposed to be while I'm here.
right.
Um, and then there's some times where that carries over, where I'll be on the other side of the bar. And it's not every time, but there's occasionally people that will step over the line. And they're like, what? Come over to my house. Come on, we're gonna have dinner or something. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. You're still kind of a stranger. Like I, while I appreciate your business and I like your conversation, I also still don't know you. Like,
Well, I was gonna ask you, does Barrel have, what do you call them? Regulars that you're just like, when you see them, you're like, "Okay, cool."
I not necessarily regulars where I feel that way. There are people that I recognize their face because they've come to Barrel a few times before, um, and maybe they were unsavory in some type of way. But I don't think, and that's one of the reasons I like Barrel a lot is that I don't think there's any regulars that I'm even like. All right, pretty much all of them I like talking to. I like having them at the bar. And occasionally I feel like everyone will occasionally get too sauced, but I feel like that's part of my job too.
Yeah,
Is to make sure that you can still function and and be somewhat responsible for the one giving you alcohol. Um,
yeah. I'm
and
pretty
so I'm
proud.
like,
Sorry, go ahead.
you know,
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
no. That's pretty much all I was saying was just rounding that off. Is like, um, you know, no, I would not say that there's any regulars I don't look forward to seeing.
We the last piece of etiquette is, if you're a bar regular, is the person next to you isn't you don't know the person next to you,
Yeah,
right? You don't know them.
I feel
So
like that's where like normal interactions have to play, where it's like, how can you tell when somebody doesn't want to talk to you? And
Right.
so, one of the bigger ones, if they have turned their body and their back is facing you, means they don't want to talk.
"How's the fish?" It's like, "Buddy,
Right.
I'm currently turned the other direction." Yeah. Yeah, I one time during was right at as COVID was transitioning out in 2021. I was living in Arlington, and one of the bars that had an outside patio was reopening. It was like their first time. Some friends of mine invited me. I said, "Sure, I'll go." Right. And the friends I had, they brought some of the, we were all like in our 30s, right? We weren't young. The vast majority of people were that were under 25. And it was like, okay, cool. We are old here. That's and if we felt old, right? And so and it was packed. And there were a couple of bartenders working. And I go to the bar to get another drink. Been there for a little while. And this guy walks up next to me. He's doing the whole holding the card up. Packed. Old girl who's bartending on that side was running. Like she was crushing. She probably she probably made $1,000 that day, easy, like without a doubt, like a lot of money. I'll say I don't know if it's $1,000 a lot of money, but she made a lot of money that day. It was packed, and I was just standing there, kind of chilling, looking at the TV or watching her work or whatever. And he was holding his card up with his buddies, and he's like, "Come on!" I was like, "Dude, what are you doing?" And he was like, "I have money." The guy's like 21 years old, and I was like, "Yeah, that's not how this works.
Right.
They're doing their job."
Yeah, I love that. I love the I'm ready to pay. Yeah, I know everyone is. And I also really like I just want to drink. Yeah. That's-
My 30 seconds later, still standing there, a guy walks up to my right, and she's running. And he's like, "Hey, hey, hey, hey." And I finally was like, "Hey, dude," 21, 22 years old. I was like, "Hey, dude, what's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, I just wanted to see where she was from." And I like visibly turned around and looked behind me. And I was like, "Buddy, she's at work."
not only is she at work, she's getting killed at
Yeah.
work right now.
He was like, "I just want to ask her where she's from." I was like, "Buddy, as someone who dated the hot bartender, don't do what you're doing. That is not the way. That is not the way, sir. They're at work." And
Mm,
it's just so funny that like re-entering the world after COVID, the people like these young people who had never done anything like this or were so inexperienced, and I was like coaching them up while they were standing there. It's like, don't do that. Don't do that. They don't
yeah.
like that. Um, and then it's just funny. Bar etiquette is such an interesting thing, and people get so awkward. But my last actual question is, what's your least favorite drink to make? And what's your favorite drink to make outside of pouring a beer? Obviously, it's pretty easy.
In terms of like something, I like how easy it is, and I like how it comes out is I'm kind of stuck because like part of it is a mule. I'm a sucker for a really good mule.
Hmm.
Just citrus, good ginger beer. Um, but I also am a sucker for a really good old fashioned. I feel like part of that comes from working at a whiskey bar.
Right.
Um, but those two are really solid, easy, good drinks. Um, and I'd say least favorite, probably both for how many things go into a good one, and then making a bunch of them after the first one goes out is like an espresso martini, but like I feel like for me to enjoy an espresso martini, it needs to have a bunch of things in them.
Okay.
And then there's also complaints about like, well, I wanted more foam. Do you have any coffee beans? And I feel like working at a whiskey bar has made me hate them more, just because we are not set up really to have like specifically an espresso martini cocktail setup. And so when I make one, it's usually using the stuff that we have on hand, you
Right.
know. And so when there's like complaints there, I think that's also what has then grown my vendetta against espresso martinis.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I actually have never had an espresso martini. To be
they're
honest,
really good.
I
It's
hear.
my favorite one is just to do a fresh pull of espresso, ounce of simple syrup, and ounce and a half of vodka, and it makes this great foam. It's really really good flavor. But you also need an espresso machine.
Yeah,
So
it's kind of important.
yeah,
That's funny. I have to give it a shot.
yeah.
I'll have to give it a shot. I think it was Emma. I'm pretty sure it was Emma. Uh, she made me a champagne drink uh,
Mm.
the other day, last week or the week before. That was it was like key lime pie. It was
Mm.
super, super, super good. I
Nice.
enjoyed the. It had some vanilla vodka in it and champagne, but it had some other stuff in it too. That was, I was like, man, you could literally put vanilla wafers in his, and I would enjoy it a little bit more.
I
Like a garnish would be the vanilla wafer.
yeah. I do like when it's something that can replicate another flavor really well, but it's like a spin on it. Those are cool.
It's really cool. It's really
Yeah.
cool. All right, cool. Well, this has been the end of simple. Oh, we're doing ASMR. This has been the end of Simple Pennies, episode 5. Uh, and we'll call this one Tomcats and Townies.
Okay. Have to, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's been a
Tomcats and
running.
Townies. I don't know who's worse, but they're both bad. I used to be a
Yeah.
townie. Being a townie was hilarious. Being a townie was real funny because people walk up to you in Walmart and they're like, "Hey," and I'm like, "Oh, buddy, I don't remember you at all. I have no idea who you are." Jefferson Jackson. That's your name, Jackson. What's up, dude? What's up? What's
Just
up?
making stuff up.
Yeah, do you remember when we were talking to Olivia the other day? And I was like, "Yeah, how is she?" I was like, "I gotta quit. I gotta quit being a townie and just stick to one bar and not go anywhere else. Like,
Yeah.
it can't be a thing." But yeah, this is it. So if you like this content, like and subscribe. Other than that, thank you for your time. Have a great day. Fantastic. Thank you, sir.
Of course.